The phone rang at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, jolting me awake from the first peaceful sleep I had experienced in weeks. I almost ignored it, but something made me reach for my cell. Mom's name glowed on the screen. We had not spoken in 8 years. Her voice trembled through the speaker. "Isla, honey, can you come home? We need you." My heart stopped. I was once the perfect daughter, the one they were proud of, until my sister Maya decided to destroy everything with one devastating lie. Before I tell you about that call that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever been wrongly accused by your own family, hit that like button, so I know I am not alone in this. Subscribe, because what happens next will shock you, and trust me, you will want to see how I handled their desperate plea for help after they threw me away like garbage. Growing up in Denver, Colorado, I thought I had the picture-perfect family. My dad, David, worked as an electrical engineer for a major construction company, while my mom, Carol, spent her days as a registered nurse at Presbyterian Hospital. We lived in a comfortable 2-story house in Lakewood, with a backyard big enough for barbecues and a 2-car garage that Dad was always tinkering in on weekends. I was 19 and in my sophomore year at the University of Colorado Boulder, majoring in business administration. I had earned a partial academic scholarship and worked 20 hours a week at a local bookstore to help cover expenses. My parents were proud of my independence and drive. They would always brag to their friends about how responsible and mature I was compared to other kids my age. Maya, my younger sister, was 16 and a junior at Lakewood High School. As the baby of the family, she had always been the center of attention. While I was the achiever, Maya was the charmer. She could make anyone laugh with her quick wit and had this infectious energy that drew people to her. I loved her fiercely and saw myself as her protector and mentor. When she started struggling with math in her sophomore year, I spent countless hours tutoring her. When she wanted to try out for the drama club, I helped her practice her audition monologue until she nailed it. But something changed when Maya turned 16. She started hanging out with a different crowd at school. Instead of the honor students and theater kids she used to befriend, she gravitated toward a group that skipped classes and spent their afternoon smoking behind the 7-Eleven down the street from school. Her grades began slipping from B's and A's to C's and D's. She became secretive about her whereabouts and started asking for money constantly. "I need $40 for new textbooks," she would tell Mom, even though it was the middle of the semester. "The drama club is taking a field trip to see a play downtown, and it costs $60, she would say, despite the fact that I knew the drama club had already wrapped up for the year. Each time our parents would hand over the cash without question. They trusted Maya completely and never thought to verify her stories. I started noticing inconsistencies in what Maya told us versus what I observed. She claimed to be staying after school for student council meetings, but when I picked her up one day, I saw her walking out of the parking lot with 3 kids I recognized as troublemakers. When I asked her about it, she became defensive and accused me of spying on her. "Why are you always trying to control my life, Isla?" she snapped. "You are not my mother, so stop acting like it." Her words stung because I genuinely cared about her future. I could see her heading down a dangerous path, and it terrified me. I finally decided to talk to our parents about my concerns. I sat them down one evening after dinner and gently expressed my worries about Maya's new friends and her declining academic performance. Dad listened thoughtfully while Mom looked skeptical. "Honey, Maya is just going through a phase," Mom said dismissively. "All teenagers rebel a little bit. You were just more mature at her age." Dad nodded in agreement, adding that Maya would figure things out on her own. They thanked me for caring, but made it clear they did not want me interfering in Maya's business. From that moment on, Maya treated me like an enemy rather than a sister. She would glare at me across the dinner table and make snide comments about how I thought I was better than everyone else. The warm relationship we once shared evaporated, replaced by coldness and resentment that made family gatherings uncomfortable for everyone. The explosion came at the end of my sophomore year, just 3 weeks before finals. Dad discovered that $3,500 had mysteriously vanished from the family savings account. This money was earmarked for my tuition for the following year and Maya's SAT prep courses and college application fees. It represented months of careful budgeting and sacrifice by our parents. When Dad confronted us, both asking if either of us knew anything about the missing funds, I was genuinely baffled. I had never even seen the account information, let alone accessed it. But Maya immediately broke down in tears, pointing a trembling finger at me. "I saw Isla using your computer late at night," she sobbed. "She was on gambling websites, and she made me promise not to tell. She said she would pay the money back before anyone noticed." My jaw dropped. I stared at her in complete shock, unable to process what I was hearing. "That is absolutely not true," I said firmly. "Maya, why would you say something like that? I have never gambled in my life. I do not even know how to access that account." But Maya continued, her performance, tears streaming down her cheeks as she painted an elaborate picture of my supposed secret addiction. She claimed I had been betting on college basketball games and poker websites for months. According to her story, I had initially won some money, which made me overconfident. Then I started losing and kept betting more, trying to win back what I had lost. She said I had confided in her about my problem and begged her to keep it secret because I was ashamed. To make matters worse, Maya had prepared evidence to support her lies. She showed our parents the browsing history on my laptop, which somehow contained visits to gambling sites that I had never accessed. She had printed out what appeared to be transaction confirmations from online casinos, claiming she had found them in my backpack. The fabricated evidence was convincing enough to make our parents believe her completely. "I cannot believe you would steal from this family and then lie about it," Dad said, his voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "We have sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, and this is how you repay us." Mom just cried silently, staring at me like I was a stranger. I tried desperately to defend myself, explaining that Maya had somehow planted the evidence and was lying about everything. But the more I protested, the guiltier I seemed to appear. Maya played her part perfectly, acting heartbroken about having to betray her big sister, but claiming she could not let me continue destroying our family. "I still love you, Asla," she whispered through fake tears. "I just want you to get help." Our parents decided that very night that I had betrayed their trust beyond repair and needed to face serious consequences for my actions. Within 24 hours, my entire life crumbled. Dad announced that I had 48 hours to pack my belongings and leave the house. He was cutting off all financial support immediately, including the money set aside for my upcoming junior year tuition. Mom canceled my cell phone plan and removed me from their health insurance policy. If you want to act like an adult and make adult decisions like gambling away your family's money, then you can live like an adult and support yourself, Dad said coldly as I packed my clothes into garbage bags. "You are no longer welcome in this house until you can prove you have changed and paid back every penny you stole." The pain of their rejection was overwhelming. I tried one last time to explain that Maya was lying, but they refused to listen. Mom would not even look at me as I carried my bags to my ancient Honda Civic. The car was a gift for my 18th birthday, and now it was all I had left. I drove to a cheap motel near campus, paying for a week's stay with the $300 I had saved from my bookstore job. The room smelled like cigarettes and disinfectant with stained carpets and a heater that rattled all night. I sat on the lumpy bed and tried to process what had happened. In less than 2 days, I had gone from being a loved daughter and promising student to a homeless outcast. The practical implications of my situation became clear quickly. Without my parents' financial support, I could not afford to continue at the University of Colorado. The tuition for my junior year was due in 6 weeks, and I had no way to pay the $8,000 I owed. I was forced to withdraw from school just 3 weeks before finals, losing all the credits I had earned that semester. I found a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood for $450 a month. The building had broken security doors, graffiti in the hallways, and neighbors who played loud music until 3 in the morning. But it was all I could afford on my bookstore salary of $9 an hour. No. To survive, I took a second job waiting tables at a family restaurant called Rosie's Diner. The work was exhausting and the customers could be demanding, but the tips helped me cover basic expenses. I worked 7 days a week, pulling double shifts whenever possible. My hands were constantly covered in paper cuts from handling books and burns from carrying hot plates. The emotional toll was even harder than the physical exhaustion. I tried calling home several times during my first month on my own, hoping my parents would realize they had made a mistake. Each time, Mom would hang up immediately upon hearing my voice. Dad changed their home number after my fourth attempt to reach them. I learned from a mutual friend that my parents had told our extended family and their friends that I had developed a gambling problem and stolen money from them. The shame and humiliation of being labeled a thief and an addict by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally was almost unbearable. Some nights I would cry myself to sleep in that tiny apartment, wondering how my life had gone so wrong so quickly. For 5 long years, I focused entirely on rebuilding my life from the ground up. The work was grueling, but I refused to give up. I took every extra shift I could get at the restaurant and eventually was promoted to assistant manager. The experience taught me about inventory management, customer service, and employee scheduling. I discovered I had a natural talent for improving operations and increasing profitability. During slow afternoons, I studied business textbooks I borrowed from the library. I completed my bachelor's degree through online courses, taking one class at a time while working full-time. It took me 6 years instead of 4, but I finally graduated with honors in business management. The sense of accomplishment I felt, walking across that stage even with no family there to celebrate, was indescribable. When I turned 25, I used my savings to start a small catering business called Ela's Kitchen. I began by preparing meals for office parties and small events working out of my apartment kitchen. Word spread quickly about the quality of my food and the professionalism of my service. Within 2 years, I was catering corporate events and weddings throughout the Denver metro area. The business grew beyond anything I had imagined. I hired 3 full-time employees and rented a commercial kitchen space. We specialized in farm-to-table cuisine with seasonal menus that showcased local ingredients. My attention to detail and commitment to excellence earned recognition from Denver's food critics and wedding planners. By my 27th birthday, I had saved enough money to put a down payment on a beautiful 3-bedroom house in the Highlands neighborhood. The house had hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and a backyard perfect for entertaining. More importantly, it was mine. Nobody could take it away from me or kick me out because of lies and false accusations. During this period of growth and success, I met Jake Martinez, a talented chef who worked at one of Denver's most acclaimed restaurants. We met when he catered an event alongside my company, and I was immediately impressed by his creativity and work ethic. He was kind, funny, and genuinely supportive of my ambitions. After 2 years of dating, he proposed to me on a snowy evening in Washington Park. I said yes without hesitation. 3 years after Maya's lies destroyed my relationship with my family, they finally learned the truth. Maya had been arrested on drug dealing charges after police found her selling cocaine to undercover officers near her college campus. During the investigation, officers discovered evidence that she had been using money from various sources, including our family's savings account, to purchase drugs for resale. Under pressure during questioning, Maya finally confessed to everything. She admitted to framing me for stealing the money and creating fake evidence to support her lies. She revealed that she had needed the money to pay off a dealer who had threatened her when she could not cover her debts. Rather than face the consequences of her choices, she had decided to destroy my life instead. A detective called me at work to inform me about Maya's confession. I remember sitting in my office holding the phone with trembling hands as he explained that I had been completely cleared of any wrongdoing. After 5 years of carrying the burden of being falsely accused, I finally had official vindication. But instead of feeling pure relief, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, including anger, sadness, and exhaustion. My parents attempted to contact me immediately after learning the truth. They sent dozens of text messages apologizing and begging for forgiveness. They called my business phone and even showed up at Isla's kitchen during the dinner rush, hoping to speak with me in person. Dad broke down in tears in my dining room, telling anyone who would listen that he had made a terrible mistake and needed to make things right with his daughter. They wrote me a 12-page letter detailing their regret and shame about believing Maya's lies without giving me a fair chance to defend myself. They acknowledged that their actions had caused me years of unnecessary pain and hardship. They offered to pay for therapy, to help me finish my education at any school I wanted to attend, and to do whatever it took to earn back my trust and love. After weeks of avoiding their attempts to reconnect, I finally agreed to meet with them at a neutral location. We sat in a coffee shop downtown on a rainy Thursday afternoon, and the conversation was more painful than I had anticipated. Both of my parents looked older and more fragile than I remembered. Dad's hair had gone completely gray, and Mom had developed deep lines around her eyes that spoke of years of stress and worry. They apologized profusely and begged me to come home. They wanted to resume our relationship as if the previous 5 years had been just a bad dream that we could wake up from together. But I found myself feeling surprisingly detached from their emotional pleas. The damage they had inflicted went far deeper than they seemed to understand or acknowledge. I told them I needed time to process everything and was not ready to simply pick up where we had left off. The trust between us had been shattered, and rebuilding it would require significant effort from all of us. I agreed to maintain limited contact through occasional text messages and holiday cards, but I made it clear that our relationship would never be the same. 3 years passed peacefully. Jake and I set our wedding date for the following spring, and Isla's kitchen continued to thrive. I had built a life that brought me genuine happiness and fulfillment. I owned my home, ran a successful business, and was surrounded by friends who truly knew and valued me. The minimal contact I maintained with my family consisted of brief text exchanges on birthdays and major holidays. Then came the phone call that changed everything once again. It was 11:30 on a Tuesday night when my mother called, her voice broken and desperate in a way I had never heard before. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "Isla, honey, I know we do not deserve to ask you for anything, but we are completely out of options," she sobbed. "We are going to lose the house. We have 30 days before foreclosure, and we need your help. Please, you are our only hope." I listened in stunned silence as she explained the financial catastrophe that had befallen my family. Maya had been released from prison 6 months earlier and had immediately resumed her drug use. She had stolen and spent the entirety of my parents' retirement savings, approximately $45,000, to fund her addiction and pay off various drug dealers who had threatened her. Meanwhile, Dad had been laid off from his engineering job when his company downsized during an economic downturn. At 58 years old, he was struggling to find employment that paid anywhere near his previous salary. Mom's hours at the hospital had been reduced due to budget cuts, and her income alone was not enough to cover their mortgage payments and basic living expenses. They had depleted their emergency fund and maxed out their credit cards, trying to stay afloat. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings on their house, and they needed $85,000 within 30 days to stop the process and bring their mortgage current. Mom's voice shook as she explained that they had already tried to get a loan, but had been denied due to Dad's unemployment and their damaged credit score. "I know we failed you terribly, and I know we have no right to ask," Mom continued through her tears, "but you are the only person we know who might be able to help us. We have nowhere else to turn." She begged me to consider lending them the money, promising they would pay me back as soon as Dad found work and they got back on their feet. I told her I would think about it and hung up the phone. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I discussed the situation extensively with Jake, who listened patiently as I worked through my conflicted feelings. Part of me felt sorry for my parents and wanted to help them avoid homelessness. But a larger part of me remembered the cold rejection they had shown me when I needed their support the most. Jake was supportive whatever decision I made, but he reminded me of something important. They chose to believe the worst about you without giving you a chance to defend yourself. They threw you out with nothing and cut off all contact. You built this life completely on your own, with no help from them. I realized that saving them from the consequences of their choices would not actually help them in the long run. They needed to learn the same lesson I had been forced to learn: how to rebuild from rock bottom using only your own strength and determination. I arranged to meet with my entire family at their house on a Saturday afternoon. Walking through the front door felt surreal after so many years away. The house looked smaller and shabbier than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the carpets were worn thin, and there was a general air of neglect that spoke to their financial struggles. Dad looked defeated, much older than his 58 years. Maya appeared gaunt and hollow-eyed, clearly still struggling with her addiction. Mom had aged dramatically and seemed fragile in a way that made me sad, despite everything that had happened between us. We sat in the living room, where I had once opened Christmas presents and done homework at the coffee table. Dad spoke first, his voice humble and pleading. "Isla, I know we do not deserve your help. We know we failed you when you needed us most, but we are desperate, and you are our daughter. We raised you and we love you even though we did not show it when it mattered." Maya finally offered the apology I had waited years to hear. "Isla, I destroyed your life because I was too much of a coward to face the consequences of my own actions. I am so sorry for what I put you through. I hate myself for what I did to you." Her words sounded sincere, but I knew that addiction had taught her to say whatever people wanted to hear. I looked at each of them and took a deep breath before responding. "I forgive you for what happened. Holding on to anger and resentment would only hurt me, not you. But forgiveness does not mean I am going to rescue you from the consequences of your choices." I explained that they had taught me a valuable lesson about self-reliance, even if that had not been their intention. When you threw me out, you forced me to learn that I could only count on myself. That lesson was incredibly painful, but it made me stronger and more resilient than I ever thought possible. I offered them limited assistance. I would pay the security deposit and first month's rent for a modest 2-bedroom apartment, but I would not save their house. You need to learn what I learned 8 years ago: how to rebuild your life from nothing. It will be hard, but it is possible if you are willing to work for it. The room fell silent except for Mom's quiet crying. Dad stared at his hands, and Maya looked like she wanted to disappear. They had expected me to either completely reject them or completely save them. My middle ground approach seemed to surprise them more than either extreme would have. "I understand," Dad finally said. "I suppose we need to learn how to be strong the way you learned how to be strong." Mom nodded through her tears, acknowledging that they had brought the situation on themselves through years of poor choices and enabling Maya's destructive behavior. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that my family had adjusted to their new circumstances. Dad had found work as a maintenance supervisor at a local school district, making about half his previous salary, but enough to cover their basic needs. Mom had picked up additional shifts at a different hospital and was working full-time again. Maya had entered a residential treatment program and was making genuine progress in her recovery. She had gotten a part-time job at a nonprofit organization that helped other addicts find housing and employment. For the first time in years, she seemed to be taking responsibility for her life instead of expecting others to clean up her messes. My relationship with my family remained limited but cordial. We exchanged text messages on birthdays and holidays, and I occasionally heard updates about their lives through mutual acquaintances. The deep bond we had once shared was gone forever, but the bitter animosity had faded into something more like peaceful coexistence. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to allow them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. True compassion is not always about rescue and relief. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting people develop their own strength through struggle. My parents had to learn the same lesson I had learned years earlier, that real security comes from within, not from external sources. They had to discover their own resilience and resourcefulness instead of relying on someone else to solve their problems. As for me, I married Jake in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by the friends who had supported me through my darkest years. We honeymooned in Italy and returned home to a life filled with love, success, and genuine happiness. I had built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal, and no one could ever take that away from me. The experience taught me that betrayal can be a terrible teacher, but it can also be a powerful one. When the people you trust most show you that you cannot rely on them, you discover strengths you never knew you possessed. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing that happens to you. I hope my story reminds you that you are stronger than you think, and that you can survive even the most painful betrayals. The people who hurt you might eventually realize their mistakes, but by then you might discover that you no longer need their approval or support to live a fulfilling life. Have you ever been falsely accused or betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and building strength from adversity. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they can survive their darkest moments and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond when life tests your resilience. Keep moving forward and never give up on yourself.